Financial Survival Network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. Go to CarrieLutz.com and sign up for 30 free micro trainings on financial survival.
1490 WGCH. This is Carrie Lutz, and you're listening to the Financial Survival Network, which is brought to you by Miles Franklin. They've been in business selling gold and silver for over 20 years, and I'm a customer because when you buy, they ship. For more information, find them on the web at milesfranklin.com or give them a call at 800-822-8080 and get a free quote. Back with us again, our old friend, Dr. Yaron Brook. And if you're as confused about the elections in Europe, wondering when the attacks on private enterprise and private equity are going to end, and when this continuing global economic turmoil that we've got, how much longer that's going to go on, well, Yaron's got some definite views on that. And first, welcome back, Yaron, to Financial.
Thanks for having me on, Kerry. It's my pleasure.
We always appreciate you taking time out to speak to us. It's crazy times we're living in, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And what makes it, I think, particularly crazy is, you know, the kind of the deja vu nature of all of this. I mean, the French tried a socialist president, and it didn't work too well for them, but they're going to do it again. You know, the Greeks have tried high inflation and, independence from the European Union. That didn't work out too well for them, but you know what? They're going to try that again. So it's like a real repeat of people don't. One of the conclusions I've come to over the years is people don't actually learn anything from experience, and they certainly don't learn anything from history. Their experiences are completely shaped by their ideas.
Yeah, and their emotions. And it just reminds me of that old saying by Dr. Johnson about second marriages, the triumph of hope over experience. And it just goes on and on and on. And you know what's going to happen. I mean, we could write the book before the guy even gets sworn into office. Things will get worse. Inflation will go up. Living standards will go down. Is there any other possible outcome?
Well, the other possible outcome, and this is what's happened in the past, is if you remember, the French elected a socialist president in the 1980s, Mitterand, and in the first few years of his presidency, he instituted all these crazy socialist policies at about the same time as Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan were kind of freeing up their economies, at least on a relative scale. And he failed miserably, and he reversed course dramatically. And he was reelected because he had reversed course, and he landed up being, a fairly good president for France. I mean, certainly not a free market guy like we would like, but not an awful socialist, because he was, I guess, to some extent honest enough to realize what a disaster his policies were. The question is, will the French get this lucky again? And if you remember, for example, in New Zealand was in awful shape in the 1980s, and actually it was a left-wing government, I think it was a socialist government, that actually instituted major market reforms that freed up the economy and actually led to this kind of boom in the New Zealand economy. So sometimes these socialists get connected to reality somehow, and they save their countries at the last minute. I think the more you wait, and given the state of the world economy, the harder that's going to be. And I think given everything that this guy has promised the French, it's unlikely that it'll happen. And I think you're going to see disaster in Greece, because there it's not even socialist. It's real radical leftists who are more, nihilists than anything else, who had control the fate of the governments in the future.
Yeah, it's just remarkable to see. And I personally believe that today's socialists are less introspective and less honest about the effect of their policies as the days gone by of Mitterand and New Zealand, and I think they just keep trying the same thing over. You haven't seen any introspection from the current administration on the failure of stimulus, the failure of every single program, green energy, you name it. Every program, every attempt's failed.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think this is the difference. And Ayn Rand actually identified this in the 1960s. She coined a term, and she called the old left and the new left, and to her the old left were the old line socialists who had a certain respect for human happiness and human success, and they completely mistakenly and even with evil intention maybe, believed that they could achieve some utopia, but a utopia where people were happy and successful and prosperous by massive redistribution of wealth and regulating the economy. The new left, on the other hand, didn't really care about human beings. They had no interest in happiness. They had no interest in progress. They had no interest in technology and industry. Quite the contrary. Their whole goal was dominated by nihilism. Their goal was to destroy, to tear down, to lower standard of living, to destroy technology, to destroy industry. And the most obvious manifestation of this idea is environmentalism, which has no real positive agenda. It just has a negative agenda. Its negative agenda is it's anti-human. Anything good for human beings is bad by definition, according to environmentalism, according to ideology of environmentalism. But this is true of these modern leftist politicians. Obama is not a traditional socialist. I mean, that's too good of a term for him. So he's not interested in establishing some kind of future utopia where we're all happy. He doesn't care that we're happy. He wants us to suffer. In a sense, what he wants is equality for the sake of equality. So he wants everybody to have the same health care, even if everybody's health care really, really is bad. He wants to destroy private equity. He's not interested in anything positive private equity might have done. But these guys are rich, and they just need to be brought down for the sake of bringing them down. There's no goal, and I think this is true of many of almost all the European leftists. European leftists, American leftists has now become dominated by this new left mentality, this nihilistic, egalitarian equality of outcome for the sake of equality of outcome, not for the sake of some proletarian utopia, but for the sake of almost human suffering. That's what motivates them. And again, I think the purest form of that you see in environmentalism. As an ideology, it is the purest form of anti-human being that there is.
Isn't that really distressing? Because
because they sell it, right? They sell it as this benevolent, we care about spotted owls and nice trees and polluted air and polluted water. And the sad, tragic thing is American people and European people buy into it. So I don't think that most people who believe in environmentalism are anti-human. I don't believe that most people who think they're liberal are this kind of new left mentality. But they vote for them. They've been brainwashed to accept these people's excuses. So even the 50% that vote for Obama, they're not bad people, but the establishment is so dominated by the left that they've managed to brainwash them. And I think we're all going to suffer for this. This is why I think if you look into the future, I think it's so depressing. It's so horrible because these people don't care. I mean, the old leftists cared to some extent. These leftists don't care, and human suffering does not. Yeah, they have no problem with human suffering, particularly if it's in the West among relatively wealthy people.
It just is mind-numbing to think that it's really all just about power and control and
envy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's all comes from envy, and these bad people, they have no right to have gotten all that money. They stole it. Hey, and let's face it, a lot of them out there got it because of crony capitalism. There's no question about that. But a lot of people actually worked hard, had goals, sacrificed, saved money, and did nothing but work to get what they have. And yet they're demonized. The ones, Absolutely. The crony capitalists are elevated. It's just. Well,
and I disagree with many libertarians on this. I mean, I think that most wealthy people made it because they worked hard. Yeah, they're in a system that's rigged by crony capitalism. But most wealthy people, 90% of the wealthy people I know, made it because they worked hard, because they were innovative, because they were brilliant in some aspect of their lives. and they did something extraordinary, and they made a lot of money. I mean, I've invested in private equity. I know private equity funds. I know people in private equity. They do a phenomenal job, and you know, many of them are billionaires and
Sure.
you know, centimillionaires and so on. And they deserve it because they create real wealth and they create real efficiency. And given how screwed up our economy is by regulations and taxes, the fact that these businessmen go out there every single day and work hard and create wealth is why the U.S. economy hasn't crumbled. You know, these are the people, for the most part, again, I mean, the Jeff Immelts of the world who are complete crony capitalists.
That's what I mean.
There's certain people in Wall Street who are complete cronies, but the vast majority of them, look, if everybody was a crony capitalist, then this economy would be crumbling, right? I mean, crumbling much worse than it is right now. I mean, literally people out in the streets and all of us, you know, desperate for food. The fact that our economy is still up there where we can still, you know, afford iPhones and nice computers and most of us still have jobs and all of this is because of the Atlases of the world, because they are an enormous number of entrepreneurs, of businessmen in established companies, small companies, medium-sized companies, very large companies, all across the board who work hard trying to create real wealth, trying to create real value, trying to produce stuff. And we need to celebrate those people. And those people, in my view, are still the major victims. You know, Ayn Rand talked about the one minority that is most discriminated against in our world, and she identified that minority as businessmen. Of course, the ultimate minority is the individual, but of those individuals, the group that is most discriminated against is businessmen. So these people who make a huge amount of money, huge amount of wealth, and then we lay onto them every bad thing that ever happens. It's their fault we have a financial crisis. It's their fault there's unemployment. It's their fault a plant in West Virginia closed. Everything is their fault, and we give them no credit for our high standard of living, for the wonderful products that we buy and the jobs that we have.
Hey, and I'm going to reach out on a limb, and I'm going to defend somebody who you've attacked, and rightfully so, in the past. But we're talking about Mitt Romney here, Bain Capital. They invested in companies such as Staples that employs 90,000 people, and the steel plant that they're being criticized for closing, they kept it going for 8 years, and finally they had no choice but to close it. But the fact of the matter is that Romney has been, for all his faults, in the private sector, he's been a job creator, and we can't lose sight of that.
Yeah, but you know, I agree with everything you said, but I think we're selling out by saying it. I don't care how many jobs Mitt Romney created. That's irrelevant. I mean, you don't measure the success of a capitalist by the number of jobs you create. What if he'd taken over a company, fired half the people, made it 10 times more productive, and created vast amounts of wealth and actually so-called destroyed jobs? He'd still be a great guy in terms of a business leader. The standard by which we measure business leaders, private equity, any kind of business leader, is whether they create wealth, whether they make money. Making money is virtue. There's a great speech in Atlas Shrugged. Many of your listeners are probably familiar with it. It's called the money speech.
Sure.
And one of the points that Ayn Rand makes is that making money is a sign of virtue. And only American society has this term called making money. Because before the Industrial Revolution, if you had money, you took it from somebody, right? So it was a zero-sum world. The Industrial Revolution made it possible to create wealth, to make money. And what Bain Capital did, let's say that they closed this plant down because, you know what? The assets of the plant were worthless. They were worth more, liquidated, and where the capital is being transferred into something more productive. That's good for them. They got rid of a negative of something that had a negative impact on the economy because it had negative value. So we need to defend private equity because it creates wealth, not because it creates jobs. You know, one of the big myths in America today is that America has lost its manufacturing edge. Now, that's complete nonsense. We manufacture more stuff in America today than ever in American history. More manufacturing happens today in America than ever in American history. But you know what? Less than half the number of people employed in manufacturing than at the peak. Why is that? because every one of our employees today is so much more productive than they used to be, and that's a good thing. We don't want a lot of people working in manufacturing. They should be able to pursue their passions. A lot of people want to be chefs and software writers and lots of other professions that don't have to do with manufacturing. So we should be celebrating plant closures. If the plant was losing money, it should be closed. Those assets could be used better by somebody else. That capital could be used better somewhere else. So I don't look at businessmen and say, how many jobs did he create? I look at businessmen and say, how much wealth did he create? And I don't care how many people he employs or doesn't employ, and whether those people are in China and Mexico and the United States. If he created wealth, I am better off, you're better off, everybody who lives in this country and actually in the world is better off. And that wealth will then be invested somewhere, jobs will be created, products will be created, values will be created that will benefit me. So I'm quite happy seeing people make lots of money, assuming they're not cronyist. And I don't like the term crony capitalism because it's assumed that's a form of capitalism. It's a form of statism. So it's crony statism.
Yeah, it's a syndicalism, I think the Austrian school referred to it as.
Yeah, well, we could just call it cronyism is fine.
Yeah, it's all about who you know and not what you know. And exactly. That's the worst part, is it undermines faith in the system, because when those crony capitalist whatever enterprises, those crony enterprises fail, they're always pointed to and say, free market doesn't work, capitalism failed. And there's nothing capitalistic about these enterprises, like the green energy debacle, which we all knew was going to happen this way because there's no other way that it could have worked, right?
Absolutely. Well, what green energy needs right now is private equity to come in and strip them of all the valuable assets, sell them off, fire everybody, and get all that capital and human capital and physical capital, get it all, shifted to something productive where they'll actually be creating something. So the best thing that could happen to green energy is to be liquidated by a private equity guy. By the way, the best movie I've ever seen about private equity and finance in general is, I don't know if you've seen this movie, it's called Other People's Money with Danny DeVito and Gregory Peck. And Danny DeVito at the end of that movie has a speech that is a must watch for anybody interested in capitalism, anybody interested to see how capitalism really works and what financiers can really do and why they're incredibly productive and why Wall Street, a proper Wall Street, are essential to the workings of capitalism. The movie's called Other People's Money. It's a fantastic look into the world of finance. And the hero's name is Larry the Liquidator.
Oh, yeah. I remember hearing about that movie. Unfortunately, I never saw it, but I'm putting that on the list. Hopefully it's on Netflix, and I will download it shortly because, it was back, I'm looking it up in 1991. I remember it was kind of controversial for the time. It's
a fantastic movie because Larry, if you remember the time, it was a time of a lot of hostile takeovers and a lot of breakup of companies and a lot of shutting down of the Rust Belt and capital moving, let's say, to Silicon Valley and places like that. And Danny DeVito plays this private equity guy who goes in and buys companies and liquidates them. But he gives, at one of the final scenes in the movie, he gives a defense of what he does and why he does it that is spot on. You couldn't have, I don't think an Austrian economist could have made a better argument for why, in a sense, creative destruction should exist. The Schumpeter idea of creative destruction. And it's spot on. And the contrast is, right, the bad guy, at least from my perspective, the bad guy, is played by Gregory Peck, right, the symbol of American virtue. And he's this old line, we're running this company for the community and for the employees, and it's all for the good of the nation. And he gives this very stirring speech, and then DeVito just rips him to shreds. And it's based on a play that's excellent. It's actually a little bit better than the movie and more consistent. But a lot of what Larry the Liquidator says and does during the movie is spot on if you believe in free markets.
Yeah, that reminds me of another movie, as long as we're reminiscing, called Head Office. Sure. Head Office with Eddie Albert and Judge Reinhold. And when he needs to make a tough decision, Eddie Albert, he's the head of a humongous corporation that it's modeled on ITT. They do coups and stuff. And when he needs to make a tough decision, he has a set of ball bearings, and he's sitting at a boardroom table that's about 200 feet long, and he rolls the balls down the table, and they land in Judge Reinhold's lap, and he has to go close down a steel factory someplace in Pennsylvania. And they ask him, and he's a little bit intoxicated when the reporters descend upon him when he comes to the town, why are you closing this factory? And he says, because we can't make money running it. And all of a sudden he becomes a hero, because finally a capitalist telling the truth, explaining why they're really doing things. And you know,
it's all about money.
Yeah.
What a shock.
Yeah.
What a shock.
Yeah. If there's no profit, then people aren't gonna stay with it, because capitalism's all about the profit motive and improving your lot. I should say free markets as well, because there's different flavors of it, but to me, the ultimate flavor is free market capitalism, where the government stays out of the way and lets people realize their potential, which is why the system was created in the first place and how it evolved to give all of us an incredible standard of living that had never been realized. Or like you said, make money, no longer be a serf tied to the land, but have freedom. So hopefully we'll get back to that again. But man, the socialistic wave is just going to bury everything in its path, and we've just got to hope that the wave peters out short of getting to the U.S. and we come to our senses again, right?
Yeah, no, and I think there's only one form of capitalism, which is free market capitalism. I think everything else is a perversion of that term. But yes, the profit motive, and one of the challenges that I think the free market movement is faced, and what makes, I think, Ayn Rand unique, is that we need to make the case that not only is our standard of living gone up, not only is free market capitalism consistent with making money and with making choices, but it is the only moral system. It is the only system consistent with human life, and that's what morality is about. Morality is not about some external code of commandments that is laid upon us, but morality is about what is good for human life. And the fact is that capitalism is the only system consistent with the requirements for human flourishing and human success and human happiness. And that's what makes it a profoundly moral system, indeed the only moral economic system, political system that's ever been discovered by human beings.
Yeah, great point, because the pursuit of happiness is really the point of capitalism. You're not going to have everybody happy. That's impractical. But to have the largest number of people pursuing their own personal gain and their own personal happiness and that of their families is got to be a lot better than the alternatives. And Yaron, you've got some upcoming events in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I'm going to be, I think both of us are going to be at Freedom Fest in July in Las Vegas. I'm doing probably 3 or 4 different things at Freedom Fest. I'm still waiting to hear the final schedule. But I'll also be, I don't know if you have listeners overseas, but I'm going to be in Israel in a couple of weeks. I'll be doing 3 debates of socialism versus capitalism with a university professor there, and a couple of other talks. And then I'm off to London, where I'll be giving 3 talks at various locations in London. And then John Allison, a good friend of mine and a board member of the Ayn Rand Institute, the former CEO of BB&T, is going to give the first Ayn Rand lecture hosted by the Adam Smith Institute in London, and that's going to be very exciting. And people can find out information about all those events on our website or on my Facebook page. Just look me up on Facebook, like me on Facebook. I always appreciate that, or follow me on Twitter. And you can find my name's spelled Yaron, Brook, Brook. And, of course, AynRand.org, Ayn Rand, AYNRAND.org.
You're out there all over the world. We've got people listening in the most isolated spots that you could ever imagine. Hey, what about What about the Objectivist Summer Conference? That's coming up, I see.
Yes, we've got a summer conference. It's in San Diego this year, which is just going to be a beautiful location. I think we've got a fantastic program. I'll be speaking there, and we've got a lot of other, really exciting speakers. It's let me just see the actual dates.
I got them here, June 30th to July 8th.
Yeah, and again, if you go to Facebook and you put in Objectivist Conferences, or if you go to my Facebook page, there are links over there. But Objectivist Conferences is the Facebook page. You can get a bunch of information there, and there's also a website which is objectivistconferences.com.
Excellent. Hey, and I just want to point out one other thing. On the AynRand.org website, you've got like tons of audio and video programs there for people to find out more about what we've been talking about and to get on the objectivist bandwagon, because we got our work cut out for us, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what people will find is what makes us a little different than a lot of other advocates for free markets is really the kind of the moral certainty we have in the virtue of capitalism, in the morality of capitalism, and more importantly, the morality of the pursuit of happiness, and why that should be your goal in life, and why it's a moral goal in life, your happiness.
Yeah, because if you're not pursuing your happiness, what are you really pursuing?
Yeah, what's the point?
So, hey, Yaron, as always, a pleasure. We will see you in July. I think it's July 11th at Bally's at Freedom Fest. Looking forward to it. And till then, you be well.
The flight numbers never peak, but the flights never do.
Right.
What the hell happened there? All right, so you be well, Yaron. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks.
Take care.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.